All right. As always, just a reminder that we do have closed captions that you can get
Well,
right from.
today
We
the
don't?
team's not letting me turn on the captions for some reason. We're trying to figure that out. So hopefully they'll be turned on soon.
All right. So stay tuned for closed captions. Moving on to the next slide.
Oh my goodness, come on now. There we go. Sorry about that.
All
There we are.
right. So as you all know, we are here because our goal is to advance the science on recovery community centers. This is a NIDA-funded project, and these good people that you see here on the slide are the people that have the discussions in the back about the stuff we're putting into the seminar series and all the other programs that were happening too. So we're done mostly with pilot study funding, but you will still hear a couple of presentations later on this year or early next year, rather. Moving on to the next slide. One of the things we have been doing is we have been creating a list of recovery community centers nationwide. And the reason we do that is because we tell people about recovery community centers, about researchers and clinicians and so forth. And they say, do I have one near me? And we want to say, yes. And here's the address and here's the phone number. And then also, we just want to know like how many there are in the country. So then for researchers and they're interested in asking questions about recovery community centers, they know who to contact. So, and as far as we know, there is no list other than this one. And if you do know of another list of recovery community centers, do let us know. If you would like to be on the list or you know of a center near you or far away from you that's not on our list yet, please let us know. We greatly appreciate to help people network with each other. Next slide. So we are funded to do research or to advance the research together on recovery community centers. And as I mentioned, our goal is to do this from multiple perspectives, to bring together people who actually lead recovery community centers, people who work there, people who use them, as well as scientists and clinicians and other people who can connect to recovery community centers. Our project is one of several that was funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse to advance the science on peer recovery support services. And together, we all formed the Consortium on Addiction Recovery Science together, called CORS. And every time we do a seminar, we give you a slide like this with microfiche text that tells you about all kinds of things that are currently happening. Two things we wanted to call out today are the pilot applications for CHEER and a toolkit. And Kristen, are you here? And can you tell us more about the pilot application call that you currently have?
Sure, I am here. So I'm Kristen Zajac. I'm the PI on CHEER, which stands for the Collaborative Hub for Emerging Adult Recovery Research. And we're one of the R24s that Bettina mentioned. And we have a new call for applications for pilot research projects. We're funding projects up to $30,000. And we're looking for projects that focus on recovery support services for emerging adults, particularly emerging adults who take medications for opioid use disorder. There's the link here. You can learn more about it. You're welcome to email me. I can put my email in the chat. And then the due date for these are December 15th. And thanks, Bettina, for letting me talk about these.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've seen a number of other pilot projects presented in this seminar series here, and they're a wonderful way to create new pathways, connections between folks to come together on a project and then use that to build forward. So thank you, Kristen. And Ashley, can you tell us about this toolkit that you guys put together?
Yeah, thanks for giving me a minute. Our team at Chestnut, we've been just really fortunate to partner directly with people with lived experience on community boards for several projects, including CHEER that Kristen just talked about, as well as the Jeep initiative that I helped to lead, and PATH, and a few other projects that are all named in our toolkit. And through these collaborations, we've just learned a ton, including from mistakes and ongoing improvement and the feedback that we've gotten from the boards who have been so generous with helping to guide us, and really like to build and maintain effective partnerships. So to help other researchers strive for that high quality community engaged work, we created a practical toolkit and filled it with personal stories from community board members on how those procedures have impacted them and what their recommendations have been. We have a lot of example recruitment materials, sample agendas, and lots of more very focused on sort of the nuts and bolts of good community engaged research with community boards focused on substance use research. So check out our toolkit. There's also a forum that we had last week, so that is now online as well. and it's the top two. I think the web page was in the chat, but it's the top 2 tiles on that web page that you can check that out. And thank you for helping us get the word out.
Perfect, because we do want to do more research in partnership, and there's some excellent how-tos in there, so I highly encourage you all to check it out. All right, Cora, can you move us to the next slide? So we wanted to report back. You might recall that last year we talked about a special issue in a peer-reviewed academic journal that would focus on recovery science. And to my knowledge, and for most of you, for all of you to back me up, is that right? That this is, I believe, the very first time that any academic journal had a special issue dedicated to recovery science. I think it's true, but if I'm wrong, please put it in the chat and correct us. But this call publications that actually is now done. The special issue is published. All of the papers are available online for free, so full access. The link is in the chat, and also a list really of all the papers and the titles and the authors and so forth. There's 23 new papers done on this. 4 of those articles are focusing on recovery community centers. Another 4 focus on other peer recovery support services. And 17 papers out of these 23 were written or include authors who have presented in this seminar series, which means that people who have been here have influenced those papers, have provided feedback on them, have thought about these issues, have advanced the conversation about them. So everything that's happening here has driven what was in that special issue. So I'm super excited about every single paper in that special issue. I hope you check it out. And I think it's one way in which you see that what you say in the seminar and the thoughts you share, the insights you share, make a huge difference in building the science. And now if you move us to the next slide, I will have Kristen tell us about another special issue.
Right. And so we are, I should say, Ashley Shado, myself, and Tess Drozdowski are going to be guest editors on another special issue focused on recovery. It's going to be published in the journal Emerging Adulthood, which is a peer-reviewed journal focused on emerging adulthood. They focus on ages 18 to 29. And our special issue is going to be focused on advances in recovery science for emerging adults with substance use disorders. So anything recovery related that you might be working on, either projects you're finishing up or papers you're writing up. The deadline for this is March 1st, but you can submit earlier than that. And we're hoping to be as successful as the Frontiers Journal. We're hoping to get a ton of submissions and to be really impactful. The reason we chose emerging adulthood is because it's got a pretty broad audience, not just of psychologists, but also of people in other fields, epidemiology, developmental psych. And so we're hoping to reach a broader audience with this, similar to the way that the Frontiers in Public Health Journal did. And thank you again, Bettina, for letting me plug this as well.
Oh, yeah, of course. Thank you for doing that. All right, Cora. Now what we want to do is move on to the live feature to really ground us back in recovery community centers and what they are. Donella, could you tell us about your recovery community center and what happens when you walk through its doors?
Oh, thank you, Bettina. Hi, everyone. I am Donella Cecrle from the Purpose of Recovery. We are in Orange County, California. We serve really all of Orange County, and we have a few little sprinkles into LA County, San Diego County. But when someone comes into the Purpose of Recovery, first they're greeted by our very lovely administrative assistant at the front desk, Malia. She is not here today, but she's such a cheerful, warm greeting that she provides to everyone that comes through that front door. We have some office suites, but the majority of people come to us for their one-on-one coaching sessions with their peer coach. And then the rest of them come to our groups that meet here in our facility. So we have a large meeting room that hosts about 13 different groups a week. Over the course of a month, we have about 50 different groups that we're hosting both in our facility and in other partners throughout Orange County, where we just bring the hope and the message of what peer support can do to support someone on their recovery journey. So if you all wouldn't mind advancing the slides, thank you. Let's go to the next one. Yeah, thanks, Cora. Our vision here at the Purpose of Recovery is that we envision communities where individuals find purpose to sustain their long-term recovery, because we know without purpose and building recovery capital, the chances of sustaining that recovery are less than if they're working with a coach who's helping them through that journey. And we're fulfilling that by building and sustaining a robust peer community here in Orange County that serves the individual in recovery and their families by providing those practical support services such as peer recovery coaching and access to resources in our community. Let's go to the next slide. So we were started by parents, supporters, and individuals in long-term recovery. Our very first board president was Marlon Karst, and he was also the first president of Faces and Voices of Recovery many, many years ago. So we were very honored to have a seasoned person in recovery who was part of this movement for many years to be our first board president. Unfortunately, he's passed a couple of years ago, but his legacy still makes an imprint on this organization, as I know he did many recovery community centers and programs nationwide. We are, of course, a recovery community center and a recovery community organization started by primarily a family who had concerns about their child's substance use. And they said, we would like to do something here in Orange County to reduce relapse. What does that look like? And they are a family that I was very familiar with. They came to me and said, we know that you have a passion to work with people in recovery. My degree is as a social worker, and my life has been impacted by losing friends to overdose and my immediate family that has been impacted by substance use. And so we put together this idea of the first recovery community organization here in Orange County during COVID. And we, like I said, serve individuals that are recovering from substance use, as well as we have family coaches that work with family members that are very confused and concerned about their loved one's substance use. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. As I mentioned, we were started during COVID, so we launched in 2020. That was a level playing field, if you will, because everyone was doing things telephonically, so no one cared that we didn't have a brick and mortar when we started, and all of our recovery coaching was online. But we knew that it was important to start pulling the community together as quickly as possible, and we launched the very first recovery rally in Orange County in September of 2021. Since then, our county has taken on the helm, and they're doing a great job now the last 2 years that they have begun to really focus that recovery happens in our community, and we've really just joined them in those efforts in the last 2 years. We also had the benefit of being awarded a state grant to build the peer recovery movement very early in our life, and over the course of the last 5 years, we're in an unusual situation where we were able to raise almost $5 million to do the work that we're doing here in Orange County. So that allowed us to put a little money aside and keep doing our good work. But most recently, just this year, we were awarded the drug court contract here in Orange County to provide peer services for drug and DUI court. The other great news about that is Drug and DUI Court is celebrating its 30-year anniversary today here in Orange County, and we've been invited to participate as the very first peer organization to provide peer support services to that particular population. So our topic today, talking about justice involved and where we are in our trajectory as an organization, just a beautiful marriage, I guess, of these two. And that wasn't planned. It just happened that way. So later on, when we're kind of sharing some input, I would also want to highlight that Andy Cecrle is on this call. Andy, maybe just unmute and say hello. He is our program director and works very closely with the justice involved population and has for many years.
Hi, good morning. My name is Andy, and it's good to be here and looking forward to continuing conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Donella and Andy.
Thank you.
That is the perfect intro you've just given us. Cora, if you can advance our slides for us. So we're going to start as usual with our polling questions. I give you sort of like a sneak peek at the content to come. So do fill out your demographic kind of stuff so we know who we're reaching. And then there are some questions about what you're about to see. And as always, you just kind of click the bubbles and then use the little gray bar at the right to scroll down until the submit button at the bottom right turns blue for you. Looks like question 5 is cut off. So it's supposed to say, how successful do you think they were in completing these in-jail remote calls between a peer recovery support specialist and the participant? All right, and once you're done with the questions, make sure you click that blue submit button. And Liv, how are we doing in terms of percentage completed?
55%.
All right, we're hoping for, we usually go for 75, 80. One day we'll get 100%.
I don't think we can because I think technically I always make it under 100 because I'm hosting the poll. $77%. Oh, just hit 80.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you, guys. So now everybody on their screen should have the answers from the room. So regarding question 5 about how successful was the study team in setting up the calls while participant was still in jail. And most of us thought that the study team probably would be able to get, or was able to get, 50% of the participants. Let's see how that actually works out. You will get the answer in a little while. And then for the question about how important is it, most of us think, although we're split, definitely needed in-person or remote would work. And the other half thinks definitely worth pursuing in-person or remote. All right, so this is something we all, well, most of us think it's worthwhile to do, even if it might be hard. And then the last question we had, in terms of talking about goals that folks had, how many participants or what percentage of participants had a goal that wasn't directly related to their substance use? And most of us, 40% of us, thought that about 75%, so the majority, 30% thought that 90% of participants would have other goals, which makes a lot of sense with what we see a lot here for recovery community centers in terms of how many goals people have. All right, so stay tuned for the answers to these questions. Cora, if you can move us forward. To give some background and to connect us back to some of the nationwide data, you guys might recall the paper we had where we did a survey with all of the recovery community centers that we could contact in the United States. And we asked about how many, if each RCC had a connection to the criminal legal system in one way or another. And 78% of the RCC said that they did have some kind of connection that would allow them to interact with them and introduce the RCC to folks. And 24% wanted more and better linkage, so that there was a connection, but it certainly wasn't optimal and there's lots of room for improvement. And we're just presenting that alongside other connection points. For example, there's greater connection with SOVA homes, there's greater connection to substance use disorder clinics than with a criminal legal system. All right, so that's just some background information. And now we're diving in. If we go to the next slide, we will have with us today Amanda and Martha, who are going to be telling us about the study that they have done. And we'll go, I guess, one more slide further, because after they present their slides, we will have Demetri from the Detroit Recovery Project telling us about how that links up to the work he does at DRP and making that linkage happen. Do we have that slide here too? Yes, thank you. Yes, Demetri Clanton, who is going to be our discussant. And of course, all of you jump in, join in. It's an open discussion. All right, with that, I'm going to be turning it over to Martha and Amanda to tell us about their study. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm going to give a quick introduction for myself. My name is Martha Tillson. I'm a sociologist by training, and I am a research assistant professor at the University of Kentucky College of Medicine in the Department of Behavioral Science and Center on Drug and Alcohol Research. Amanda, do you want to say hi as well?
Sure. Hi. Thank you again for having us. I'm Amanda Fallin-Bennett, an associate professor at the University of Kentucky College of Nursing, and I'm also a co-founder of Voices of Hope, which is a recovery community center here in Lexington.
And as I've said, we are so excited to be here today. Before we begin, I do like to mention that, so I've been doing substance use disorder research for almost 10 years now, which seems wild to say. But I always love to let people know that I've been in this field for so long and I am so passionate about it because I'm also myself a person in recovery. So I feel like I know how important it is for us to shine a spotlight on these issues and to work together to find sustainable solutions. And this project in particular that we'll be talking about today was something that I became involved with actually during my doctoral training. So this was really my first exposure to peer recovery support specialists and recovery community centers because in my own, especially in my early recovery, that really wasn't something that I had any connections or exposure to at that time. So I really found RCCs and peers through research. And this project has just been such an amazing learning experience. And I'm so glad that we can share that process as well as some of our findings with you all today. Next slide, please. All right, just some quick acknowledgements before we get started. The research we're going to be talking about was supported by the National Institutes of Health under the National Institute on Drug Abuse as part of the HEAL initiative. As Amanda mentioned, she is the co-founder of Voices of Hope. I have no conflicts of interest to report. Next slide. All right, before we dive into the gritty details, I wanted to zoom out a little bit and give you all a little bit of context. So the JCOIN project, which stands for Justice Community Opioid Innovation Network, or now more recently Justice Community Overdose Innovation Network, is actually much bigger than just our little project here in Kentucky. So this is a national cooperative agreement funded by NIDA under HEAL, as mentioned, with the overall goal of increasing the capacity of the criminal legal system to respond to the opioid epidemic. The cooperative had this ambitious overall plan to build a network of researchers, justice administrators, and practitioners. Next slide, please. And as you can see here, the network was very large. So across all of the JCOIN research studies, we had representation from 38 different states and Puerto Rico, 139 counties. I noticed that we do have some other JCOIN affiliated folks on this call as well, and they will really attest to the diversity of different kinds of projects that we had across the cooperative. So that little yellow star there, that is Kentucky. And I share this to let you all know that this has really been a large-scale collective effort, right? Opioid use and overdose within criminal legal system involved populations is a really big problem, and it's required a lot of very smart people collaborating and working together over the past 5 years. It's actually such a big problem that we are just now wrapping up this 5-year project that we'll be reporting on today, but NIDA has actually awarded Kentucky and many other excellent teams of researchers around the country another round of JCOIN funding to continue our effort. So the work is not over. As a side note, if it looks from this map like there might be some JCOIN research happening in your area and you'd like to find out more, I noticed that Allison dropped a link in the chat. Thank you, Allison. That's the JCOIN website homepage. You can scroll down and look at funded projects and see the investigators that might be close to you, especially if you are a member of an RCC and thinking about potential collaborations. Next slide, please. All right, so as mentioned, this work is happening all over the country, but something that I think is really important to highlight is that our hub in Kentucky is the only one to focus uniquely on women, which is important for so many reasons, right? We know that women have unique risk factors for substance use disorder, unique considerations that affect our ability to engage in formal treatment services, things like parenting, motherhood, pregnancy, unique forms of stigma. I'm exposing myself as a sociologist here, but that gendered stigma is another factor as well. But women are also the fastest growing demographic in the criminal legal system, so definitely worthy of specific attention in research areas. And in our project, we had 2 intervention arms within our experimental condition. One of those intervention arms just received a telehealth meeting with a community provider for medications for opioid use disorder, while the other arm received that telehealth meeting plus peer navigation. And that peer navigation is really what we're going to be focusing on in the presentation today, with the overall goal of linkage for incarcerated women transitioning to the community, that linkage to opioid use disorder treatment, especially medications. This would not have been possible without this robust and incredible partnership that we have between our University of Kentucky research team and Voices of Hope, our local recovery community center here in Lexington. And our JCOIN grant funding supported the salaries of 2 certified peer support specialists, both of whom were women, like all of our participants, and who also shared relevant lived experiences, including a history of incarceration or legal system involvement, a history of opioid use disorder, and use of medications as part of their recovery. Go to the next slide, please. As I mentioned, this RCC partnership was so important to us, so I do want to take a moment to highlight just how amazing they are. I feel like I could spend the whole hour talking about them. I think we can drop a link in the chat to the website for the RCC if y'all want to check them out or give them a follow on social media. So in the brick and mortar RCC, Voices offers over 1,000 recovery meetings a year. They offer telephone recovery support, one-on-one recovery coaching, community events, referrals to other services. But then they also have a mobile outreach unit, and they have support coaches embedded in over 80 external facilities, including jails, prisons, opioid treatment centers, buprenorphine clinics, syringe service programs, you name it. Voices really has a wide-ranging reach across the state. And I share all of this to demonstrate how robust of a community Voices has. So for the 2 JCOIN coaches on our project, all of their work was actually conducted remotely. So it was Zoom calls, phone calls, messages to participants, and their day-to-day work environment, their supervision, their colleagues, that was all here at the physical RCC itself. Which really made for an exceptionally strong team and a strong partnership and a support system for them as well. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so what exactly did the intervention look like? I know I mentioned it very briefly. So the peers would conduct an initial telehealth session with the participant while she was still incarcerated. So after our team had screened, identified a woman as eligible, enrolled her in the study, our research team would connect the peer and the participant in jail. And that initial session was really focused on an assessment of recovery capital, barriers and facilitators, supports in the community, thinking about any post-release challenges that women anticipated, and identifying primary goals after their release from jail. Now, while the overall goal of the study was linkage to treatment and linkage to medications, peers did not restrict the goal that a participant could select, which was very important and consistent with their training and their approach. Our research team would then track participants to see when they got out of jail. And as soon as we noticed that a woman had been released, we would notify the peers, and then they would start tracking and locating participants in the community. So this tracking and locating would go on for 12 weeks. And during that time, the peers would be providing participants with recovery support, navigation to treatment, referrals to other resources. Even when they were unsuccessful reaching a participant, they would persist. They would keep trying for those whole 12 weeks. Oftentimes, they were eventually able to get in touch. But if the participant was engaged, they did have the option to sign up for free ongoing recovery coaching after the 12 weeks as well, so they could continue those services. And if you're interested to see a more detailed description of the intervention, it looks like Allie did put the link to the paper in the chat that is open access, so feel free to take a look. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so by the numbers, we were very successful. We had about a 90% success rate in terms of actually completing those baseline sessions while women were incarcerated, which we definitely want to celebrate. So of the 301 participants that we randomized to peer navigation, about 90 of those completed their baseline before they were released from jail. And then we also completed 3-month follow-up interviews in the community. And again, very successful. Our research team had a 90.7% 3-month follow-up rate with those participants, which we are definitely very proud of. Let's go to the next slide. Thank you. So as part of those initial sessions, as mentioned, participants were asked to identify their goals for after jail release. And if you remember, that overall goal of our JCOIN project was to connect women with OUD treatment services in the community at release, especially medications. But that's what's so interesting about this table, I think. So yes, the top 2 goals described by women were recovery, kind of in general, and then SUD treatment. But look at all those other goals in that table. Family and children were not far behind. We see employment as well represented there, housing, education, transportation. And I share this because I think this highlights, as Bettina was mentioning earlier, I think this really highlights the strength of the peer support approach. So while we as researchers may have had our sights set on treatment and engagement in treatment, the peers, because of that robust training that they received through the RCC, were really more focused on recovery capital in a holistic sense. And this was such a strength because the peers could really focus on meeting women where they were at and working to set them up for success after they were released from jail. Next slide, please. All right, so as mentioned, after release, the peers would conduct outreach to participants for 12 weeks with weekly attempts by phone call, text message, Facebook message, flyers, and overall they were really successful. So 78.4% had at least one session completed with their peer after release from jail, with an average of about 3.5 sessions over the 12-week period. Or a little over one session a month if you want to break it down that way. And you can see from the graph, this is a pretty skewed distribution. So most participants are over on the left and really only had a few sessions with their peer, but you can see on the right side, some participants really continue to engage with their peer on a regular basis. I see Victoria had a question in the chat. Is this pretrial or post-sentencing release? We didn't screen for where they were in terms of that kind of flow through the criminal legal system. We did just ask women if they anticipated a release between 7 and 60 days from the time of enrollment. So it was self-reported if they did anticipate getting out. That didn't always line up, but that was the only screening that we had as far as timing in the criminal legal system flow. So thanks for that question. But I bet you all are wondering what our findings were. We have published a main findings paper. It's not open access, but we can still put the link to that in the chat, and I would be happy to share a copy directly with anyone if you want to reach out. And overall, 44.2% of our experimental participants engaged in any type of substance use treatment during the first 3 months post-release, which 44% is pretty good, with 21.5% receiving prescribed MOUD specifically. Women in the peer navigation condition, just as a sign, did have slightly better odds than the other telehealth only condition on engaging in SUD treatment, with no differences found for MOUD. However, we also found that completion of a greater number of peer navigation sessions in the community was associated with significantly fewer days of substance use and opioid use specifically, which is the main finding in that paper that was just linked. But that really led us to think more closely about outcomes related to engagement with peer support, particularly those that might map onto a more holistic conceptualization of recovery consistent with the work that peers do. Let's go to the next slide, please. So to that end, we looked at several scale measures, which I believe we'll also have some links for in the chat. First, we wanted to examine recovery capital. And we found that more sessions with the peer support, I think if you can click one more time to get that graph to pop up. I didn't think I put animations in. Perfect, thank you. Which you can see on that graph, more sessions with the peer support was independently associated with statistically significant improvements to recovery capital, which we measured using the BARC-10. These are results from a regression model, so we did include some covariates in there as well. And then we also had similar findings for perceived social support, which we measured using the multidimensional scale of perceived social support, which looks at support from family members, friends, and a significant other as well. In addition to recovery capital and social support, we go to the next slide. Women who completed more sessions with a peer after jail release also reported significantly higher self-esteem, as well as significantly higher self-efficacy in recovery as well. So we haven't published these findings yet on this slide and in the previous one, but I did think that they would be really exciting to share with this group in particular, as we think about the work that peers and RCCs are doing. That work intersects with people of so many different recovery pathways and at so many different points in the recovery journeys. And it's really important, I think, that we can conceptualize these endpoints of peer services and RCC services more broadly in ways that really encompass that diversity. So now I'm going to pass it along to Amanda, who's going to share about adaptations to the RCC approach, challenges and benefits of our Kentucky JCOIN model, and some closing thoughts from the University of Kentucky research team and the Voices of Hope RCC team. So we can go to the next slide and Amanda can take it away.
Right. So thank you, Martha, and thanks again for allowing us to be here. And so Voices of Hope has had the benefit of partnering with many research studies at the University of Kentucky. So it's been really wonderful. And each of these has allowed Voices of Hope to consider adaptations to the general services. And so at Voices, generally, the RCC services are provided in person or over the telephone, typically. As Martha mentioned earlier, Voices of Hope does have a presence in other counties. So there's a recovery community center that's located in Lexington, one of Kentucky's larger cities. And then about 16 or 17 other counties have a Voices of Hope peer that's located in another facility, such as a syringe service program or criminal legal system setting, etc. But the only brick and mortar presence is in Lexington. And then at the RCC, the services are, for all participants. So they're not necessarily tailored to unique characteristics, such as gender or whether someone was recently released from jail at the brick and mortar RCC. Next slide, please. And so the challenges of the Kentucky JCOIN approach especially when it first launched at Voices, was learning that we could not always plan for jail releases. It's one thing to be embedded within a jail and working with someone, but even with all the resources that JCOIN was able to provide, we tried, for example, to have the peers say that they could come and pick women up who were leaving jail. In a lot of these jails are rural. We were having participants that could be released, let's say at 10 p.m., have nowhere to go. We would ask, could there be coordination with the peers? We could come get someone. It was never possible. The timing and the location of release was not something that was able to be worked out. And so it's hard to connect. This launched right in the middle of COVID. And so but still had really strong partnerships that were developed by the UK JCOIN team, such that we were still able to do the telehealth and the Zoom visits in the jail, but it was a challenge from that busy environment. It was definitely difficult to reach participants. The peers at Voices were the ones that work at the physical RCC are very used to in person, over the phone, and this was new in terms of all of the tracking and really the intensive outreach. And then there are very significant resource insecurity issues in certain parts of rural Kentucky. We would have participants released somewhere with no public transportation, no Uber Lyft, no food bank, who would call the peer and just be hungry or, have no way to leave their home. And so we really learned a lot about some of the more remote regions of our state and the extremes of the resource insecurities. Next slide, please. And so some things that we felt like had worked well with the JCOIN approach were the shared lived experiences. And so the peers, as Martha mentioned, had very similar lived experience to the participants. They're very familiar with Lexington and the central Kentucky region, but they did resource gathering trips to all the JCOIN counties. So they walked into treatment facilities, asked to take tours. They went to sober living or recovery residences. They attended meetings in the JCOIN communities so that they could really relate to if they were going to refer a participant somewhere, they really wanted to know what it was like. They even went to food banks, things like that, just to see what things were like in that county. Because of JCOIN, Voices started using social media to begin to maintain contact with participants. And so because, this was approved through the study, we set up a JCOIN Facebook account with their first name that was affiliated with the study. And they were able to reach out to some participants that way who didn't have a consistent phone or who didn't have a phone that they could provide to us while they were incarcerated. And then embedding the peers in the larger research team has some benefits for a lot of members of the research team who may not have had as much, they may not have as much experience, working with peers. And so we'll share a little bit more about those benefits on the next slide. So it is, I'm in a little bit of a unique position, I suppose, to provide like thoughts on benefits from the UK research team and benefits from Voices, being myself a member of both teams. But the UK research team shared that being part of this helped them to have respect for the unique perspective of people with lived experience. The integrated approach was helpful for retention. So, of course, for Voices, it was new to have an entire research team that would meet every week, help track the participants, help, provide tips on, how to do this. And then I think the peers helped build an understanding of participant-centered approaches. As Martha mentioned, even if the goal of the research study was linkage to MOUD, it's not everybody's individual goal. And so the peers just have, more inherently with their training, a better understanding of that, perhaps, than we might as researchers if you get sort of tunnel vision on your goal from your grant, and then just understanding the value of peer support. So next slide, please. And then I asked the Voices of Hope team to provide what they thought were the benefits of participating, and they sent such a long list. It was very heartwarming, but this is a summation. They said that they learned a lot more about issues facing people who were recently incarcerated, particularly women. Even though these peers had themselves been, incarcerated, they had the opportunity with working with these hundreds of women, and particularly in the really rural and more remote areas of our state. It did lead to the adoption of social media coaching sessions more broadly at Voices of Hope. So now there are certain other projects at Voices where they use the same approach, which is something that we would not have explored had it not been for JCOIN. The staff say a lot how much it helped with professional development opportunities for staff, being able to be involved in these meetings, learning about protocol, writing, following protocols. And one of the JCOIN peers wanted to share that she's been promoted since she was part of the JCOIN project, and she's now a program coordinator. And so she had credited being part of JCOIN as, really helping her feel like she could take that next step. Some managers at Voices said that partnering with JCOIN and other research studies creates a research culture within the RCC where staff have some appreciation for research, but also they feel that it brings credibility from certain stakeholders in Kentucky that they have this strong relationship with UK. And then it has led to networking opportunities and other collaborations. And so some members of the UK team have to shout out Martha at this, who is now at the community meals at Voices, but so many members of the UK community now are part of Voices, and they come and participate, and the staff really talk about how much they appreciate just those chances to talk about other, potential career advancement and things like that. So all in all, it was a really positive experience. Go to the next slide, please. And so we would be happy to take any questions. And I see that there are some questions in the chat that I might have missed, but we're happy to take them now.
I have a question.
Go for it, Lynn.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. I really love the presentation and the work you guys have done. I apologize if I missed it, but I was curious, do you have any analyses, or are you thinking about anything that might be like a mechanism of action or mechanisms of action?
Could you say more about what you're thinking as far as mechanisms? Yeah.
Well, like how does success happen? Like it's, contact exposure, but what about the contact is facilitating success?
We're doing a little bit more now to code the actual visit data. And so we have visits from the peers that, as we mentioned, like they could have been over the phone. In some rare cases, they were in person. When the peers were traveling, they could have been, over Zoom. And so we're doing a little bit more now to code the specifics of each visit to be able to hopefully look in more depth to see if things like that made a difference is one thought. So we have quite a bit of qualitative data as well in our visit notes.
Yeah, I'm glad that you highlighted that, Amanda. And that's another planned analysis that we have. It's to look at what the actual initial goal was pre-release, and then use that as a metric of success after release as well, which is, I think, kind of to your point, Lynn, like when we're talking about what is success from engaging with a peer, right? Like we kind of have to listen to the participants as far as what they think their success is going to look like. Whether it's like getting their license back, or getting a job, or getting to see their kids again. So that's another thing that I want to highlight. But I also, because so much of peer support, I feel like the process of peer support is kind of like a black box, right? Like, we know that it works. We know that people appreciate it and people like it, but like, how does it actually happen? I was really, and I know that I mentioned this in the chat, but I was really proud of the Facebook paper that we published, because a lot of that Facebook paper was analysis of de-identified chat data between the peers and the participants, which I think really gave us an opportunity. Like, when you say, oh, peer support participants, you don't really get a sense of like what that looks like, and actually being able to say, like, what kinds of things did the peers say to the participants? How did the participants respond to the peers suggesting things to them or offering them resources? And I think that that was just a really nice opportunity for us to be able to illustrate that in a way that I think is really accessible for people to be able to understand who aren't working to peers in that day-to-day space. But I'm so glad that you asked that question, because I feel like that is one of the sticky wickets of recovery support services.
Yeah. Thanks.
How does the magic work, right?
Yeah, exactly. The secret sauce.
Exactly. While you guys are still formulating questions, Demetri, I was going to ask you to explain to us and to share with us how the Detroit Recovery Project actually interacts with the criminal legal system, and how you are able to connect people who are being released from jail with resources in the community, the challenges, the barriers, the success stories, and how it relates to what Amanda and Martha have shared.
No problem at all. Just a quick introduction. My name is Demetri Clanton, a social worker by trade, but I'm the project director here at DRP for short. And I oversee a grant called Rise Up, which is really focused on recovery, integration, support, and empowerment for our participants. And what we really try to do is tap into the jail systems as well to be proactive in providing services. So one of the main successes of the program is that now that I think we have about maybe 62 participants overall in our program. And with that, we provide monthly groups called the Roundtable, and we are heavy on peer support specialists as well. We have 2 superstars on our team, and they have lived experience. And we find that is, the recipe or the magic that gets the connection together. Our participants really love coming to our group and picking the peer support specialist brain and how they navigated when they got out of prison and/or jail. And just as the project, we are having trouble too connecting with the women in our program. But I am so happy to announce that we finally have a meeting on the books for the Michigan Department of Corrections on October 23rd to actually go into the women correctional facility. So, which is nice. I'm super excited about. So hopefully that meeting goes well and we can really be active with that. As of now, it's kind of skewed. We have a lot of men in our program, and we do have some women, but I would like to create more of a balance and create more of a safe space for women too. So it's really, the program itself is really successful. It's just the barriers we're getting into the jails, the lack of resources, transportation, and we do offer those things, but it's only so much we can do, limited to what we can do. DRP's been around for about 20 years now, but it's still so many limitations that we have. But my staff goes above and beyond, and I even get my hands dirty too. I prefer to. That's just the trick of the trade. But that's kind of what we're focusing on right now. So there are a lot of similarities to what JCOIN, the project, was doing, and some differences as well. But I think what I was hearing is that I think we need to be more active in trying to get in JPay and having those Zoom calls. I think we'll be a lot more successful with that as well.
And Demetri, can I ask you, when you approach people who are in jail or just being released, do they know what a recovery community center is? Is this all new to them? Like, how does that work, that initial contact?
Yeah, this is new to them. So, and we've had a lot of participants that spent decades in prison. So it's kind of like starting from scratch. We have to, when it comes to resumes or when it comes to just simply how to use a phone, right? They are not exposed to what's going on out here in the world. Things are moving and changing at a rapid pace. So we just kind of break down. We have flyers. I also have a case manager too. That's awesome. And we kind of present. We go to different organizations and we go to the jails. We're now going to go to the jails to present what we offer. and set up those relationships and rapport. And hopefully by the time they get released, we can provide transportation and get them right to DRP to get wraparound services.
That's awesome. And I see here that Lynn has a question for all of us.
Thank you. Yeah, I was wondering, doing telehealth pre-release, sometimes the devil's in the details. It can be a little sticky for many jails and prisons to kind of swallow the idea of telehealth. Was it already existing in your environments, or did you actually have to negotiate, hey, let's do some telehealth and get people to get on board with that? That's a little dicey.
For JCOIN, I would say it's different than telehealth. It isn't something that would need like the HIPAA, protections and things like that. It's more of a Zoom call. But I would say that Martha could speak better to how JCOIN was able to set that up, because I think it was through the influence of the University of Kentucky and as a research study and it would have been much more difficult, I think, coming in as a recovery community center asking for it. But the fact that it's not officially telehealth might be part of what makes it easier as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think definitely to Amanda's point, the fact that the university staff were also tasked with coordinating it, right? So we got to say, like, you don't have to do anything. We just need like a private room where the woman, the participant, can have a laptop and Wi-Fi access and either access to speakers and microphones, or like a headset if it needed to be more confidential. To be able to connect. We will set everything up. We just need the space. We just need you to open the door and let us in so we can set it up. And that definitely, like, lowering their involvement in what we were asking of them, I think was really beneficial. But we also had the timing where our implementation, right when we were trying to get in the field, was right when COVID started happening. So it was 2020, as Lynn remembers well, which impacted a lot of the JCOIN studies. And we were just very lucky in that we had, before anticipating COVID, we had written a grant that was already proposing telehealth connections or virtual connections with providers and peers in the community, so that when everybody was scrambling to adapt to COVID, we were saying, well, this is already what we have been planning to do. So I think that jails at that point in time were also a little bit more amenable to this idea, because, all of their courts and all of their attorney visits and everything also had to transition to a virtual format. So we were able to capitalize on that timing a little bit, but I definitely agree it can be more of a challenge in some jails than others.
Cool. Thank you.
And do you think that this is now something that people are building on and saying, we did it during COVID, we are fine and happy to keep it? Or are people scaling back and saying, now we're no longer open to this?
It's a good question. I'd be curious if others on the call have experience. We just have our little Kentucky site here, but we completed our enrollments a couple of years ago at this point, 2 years ago, I believe. So we haven't had to go into the jails and do those Zoom visits in a while. But does anyone else on the call have experience with that in their local areas?
Ashley, go right. Oh, is it a question, or are you going to answer a question?
No, I was going to say it's not specific to telehealth or being able to do sort of this virtual connection with clinicians, but I have heard a few folks talk about the tablet. Like there was sort of this widespread distribution of tablets to people who were incarcerated, and that there's pushback on that now, and it being taken away. And obviously there's pushback on that pushback, that's what's bringing it to my attention. But I don't know if there's a correlation there between that and being able to get services virtually.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. So if you guys hear about anything about success stories continuing, because it seems like, if it was working then, why would we stop having it work for us now?
Exactly.
And Andy and Donella, for you guys, you've connecting with a criminal legal system, but you haven't done any like remote work, right? It's how does it look like for your RCC?
So we haven't done any of the telehealth / remote work. That's something I'm processing a lot of information that you guys have shared here, and it's kind of got my head thinking in a different thing. I physically go into our local county jail, and I've been doing smart recovery on the veterans pod, and so we've got a very limited small footprint currently, and I'm hoping that my presence there will allow us to expand or whatnot. But as far as to try to start working inside while they're inside to link them to get them to move to the outside, that's going to be a new idea. It's not. It is a new idea for me because just historically I've worked in jails for off and on for like at this point about 13, 14 years. And all of my experience with the jail so far have been they are super resistant to anything new. These are also much larger jails. The one that I work here locally's probably got a couple of thousand inmates, and then the one previously we had 4,000. And so trying to get them to open a room, for anything is challenging. So I think the connection to the university and the research and all that is probably a really important aspect of trying to figure out if we're going to try to do something more robust with that. We're probably going to need to get more partners to help with that. But Donella, you have some thoughts probably.
Well, I think the other issue that we've run into, we have another partner here in Orange County that they do services on the curb as people are being released and trying to make sure that they get them into resource navigation right away. I think the bigger challenge is people with lived experience getting clearance to work and go into the jail. That's really been more of the challenge. Both Andy and I have clearance to go in and provide group support, but we don't have the justice involved background that limits our exposure or limits our access. And that's another issue. So if you're talking about lived experience, peer to peer, most of the facilities that's the stopping point right there. So right now, the support that we're providing in the court is any of our peer support specialists that have the lived experience. These people are sitting in the courtroom side by side, providing that support. They're not going into the jail per se to do in-reach. So the only in-reach we've been able to provide are for people that in our team that don't have the justice involved background.
That's a great point. And I saw Demetri nodding. I'm glad you raised your hand. Go right ahead, Demetri.
Yeah, I'm having the same troubles as well. I have two, peer support specialists, and they cannot go into the prisons because of their backgrounds. And it's so unfortunate. I think when you try to get recovery and you try to receive services, there still is so much red tape and politics to getting help, even for those that are trying to get their life back on track. And one of my specific staff, she's doing such an exceptional job, and the participants connect with her so very well. They're really, being deprived of what she can offer them because she's living it. So myself and my case manager are going to go into the prisons, but I feel like we can help, but not like, the staff can, because they've lived it. So that's another barrier that it took us maybe almost a year to get into the jails. And I don't know how much longer it's going to take for my staff to get in, but that is a major barrier and hindrance to the program that we're experiencing as well.
Yeah. Go ahead, Donella.
Yeah. So one of the thoughts I've had is that those of us that can go in and start making the relationship, then we can arrange for visiting hours for our peer support specialists as visitors to come and at least meet with the inmate, the person that's incarcerated, to at least get that face-to-face with a peer support specialist. Maybe it's through the glass, on phone, but at least we're in there making that initial connection. That's one of the ways that we've looked at being able to do that warm handoff.
Great connection. Great thought. Amanda.
I just was going to add that when Voices of Hope first started out, we really had a lot of trouble. I remember actually one of the facilities in Lexington reached out to us, asked for someone to come meet a meeting. Voices was much, much smaller back then. And then they did reject every person that we potentially put forward. However, we've come a really long way. And I do think that the partnerships with the university have helped, because with JCOIN and with another study we worked with, we were able to place peers. We had many, many, many meetings with, university staff, me, the peers. And then once we started having success, we were actually approached and asked to place peer support specialists within the prisons in Kentucky. And we got to sit down at the table and talk about backgrounds. And there are certain things that they will not exempt, such as if anyone's been incarcerated and they had some kind of issue there, and they will not allow our peers to be placed where they were recently incarcerated. We've come a really long way in Kentucky, and we only place peers with lived experience. And having small success really helped change people's minds about their willingness to do it.
Is there any way that your partners in the criminal legal system can share their successes and their change of hearts with other peers in the criminal legal system, so they can help you spread their word?
It's a great idea. We had on the Healing Community Study, which I'm sure many of you may also be aware of, there was a whole criminal legal systems team, and they had so many meetings to help place our peers in criminal legal settings, and they probably do have a lot of lessons learned of how, and we have had a lot of success stories that we've tried to highlight. But I do think that the university opened the door, but then people were able to see the success.
Right. And I see here a question from Emily. Emily, do you want to elaborate on your question?
Sorry, I was in transit, so I didn't want to interrupt.
Sorry.
No, I was just thinking, so like drug treatment court graduates would have had their histories typically expunged, and so I didn't know if that was kind of one door in that maybe other folks with more extensive involvement wouldn't have. And so I also don't know the extent to which drug courts are kind of available and linked up to the prison and jail system there too. So just a thought based on my own work with drug treatment courts.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that thought. And I think, Casey, you have some personal experience too that you were sharing?
Yes, so I am a drug court graduate, and I also was able to do like 6 months aftercare. And today I get to work for the Purpose of Recovery. I was started as an intern. I've done 2 internships there, and today I get to work there and be supportive for my peers and get to show up to every drug court that they have in Orange County.
That's awesome. These success stories make all the red tape worth breaking and pursuing, going through them. Very cool. I did want to remind people that we are at the hour, so the official recording is going to stop in terms of what we're going to keep recording, but what we're putting on the website will stop here, and everything said after this point, we will just take notes on and share with others in case you have resources, ideas, and so forth. All the presenters are going to stay around until 1:30 for other more in-depth questions, thoughts you wanted to share, anything else that it connects to our topic.